Hello, my name is Lisa Singh. I will be presenting Module 4 of EDD 830 Leadership Theory. I will be presenting 4 contingency leadership theories and their models, and out of the 4, the one that could best be implemented at writer's place of employment. So I'll begin the discussion. Leadership Theory and Leadership Model. Lucier and Atchua 2016 reported that researchers understood that there was no governing or superior style of leadership that could be applied to every situation. Researchers made the conclusion as the leadership styles and characteristics that had been studied up until the latter years of the 1960s failed to uncover a style or characteristic that could be universally applied to any situation. The focus of research then shifted to an exploration of the characteristics and settings of the situation and the ways leaders navigated within the situation to obtain organizational goals. With the focus amended to account for the characteristics of a situation, the emergence of contingency leadership theories was born. The prerequisite understanding was that leaders would have to modify their thoughts and actions to satisfy the needs of a situation. Researchers sought to explore behaviors within the context of diverse settings and needs through the acknowledgement that leadership took place in a controlled situation, and that there was an inevitable interaction between those characteristics and the leader's actions and personality. The following discussion presents 4 contingency leadership theories and the main points of those theories. So I'll begin with contingency leadership theory. Lucier and Atchua reported that the first theory developed that specifically addressed how variables found in the situation interacted with the behavior and personality of a leader. And this was the contingency leadership theory. The theory was developed in 1951 by Fiedler. The contingency leadership theory presumed that the effectiveness of a leader was dependent on the style of leadership the leader embraced, as well as how well the style was congruent with the job's context. The theory presented that the style of leadership reflected behavior or personality. The personality was understood as being oriented with the trait theory, while the behavior was understood as being oriented with the theories of behavior. And we have discussed that in chapters 1 and 2 and 3. The theory held that leadership was continuous and that situations should not precipitate a leader's change in leadership style. Instead, this theory suggested that the leader, quote unquote, changed the concept of their job, the context of their job. This is Lucier and Atchua 2016, page 112. I'll discuss the model, the leadership contingency theory model. This was oriented towards relationships or oriented towards tasks, and also considered situational favorableness. So Lucier and Atchua reported that Fiedler was the first researcher to generate a model that was able to correlate the job to the style of leadership. The theory's models was used to ascertain whether a leader's style was oriented towards relationships or oriented towards tasks. The theory also sought to ascertain whether the leader's style matched the situation. The theory observed within the situation the membership between followers and leader, the structure of tasks, and position power. So tasks or relationships. Lucier and Atchua reported that when using the model, the first variable to be determined was whether the leader's style was inclined towards tasks or relationships. The understanding by Fiedler was that leaders gained a sense of accomplishment with completing tasks or establishing and preserving follower relationships. Of the 2 styles of leadership, there is no one best style. Though both styles fall within a continuum, leaders are inclined towards one. The style of leadership that is appropriate is driven by the situation. Situational favorableness. We'll discuss this now. Lucier and Atchua 2016 reported that after a leader had determined style, the next step in the model is to determine the situational favorableness. and that's quoted, determine the situational favorableness, page 114 of the text. The degree of influence that may be wielded over members of the team enabled by the situation is what Fiedler described as situational favorableness. Favorable leader situations were described as those where the leader had more control over followers. The variables included leader-member relations, task structure, and position power. Lucier and Achua, page 114, that was a quote. The leader-member relations involved an assessment of whether the relationship was friendly or cooperative, which would be deemed good, or difficult and antagonistic, which would be considered poor. Other considerations involved assessing whether the leader was accepted, respected, and trusted by followers. These considerations and determining confidence in the leader heralded the relationship as good. Next, task structure. Leaders would need to determine whether there was structure or no structure to tasks. Now, remember, we're still following the model. An exploration of tasks for repetition, ambiguity, routine, and whether tasks were standard and easily understood aided the leader in determining whether the situation was favorable. Structured tasks and jobs reflect a situation that is more favorable. Position power. Leaders would need to explore whether the position holds power. Exploring whether leaders are able to fire, hire, punish, reward, assign tasks and responsibilities, and give promotions or raises aids leaders in determining the position and whether it has that power. A favorable situation was understood as one where leaders possess the power to carry these out. Lucianacci, 2016, report that determine which leadership style is relevant and practical, the leader must answer the model's question, which exists on a flow chart. After answering the first question, which involves whether relations are good or bad, the leader must follow the good or bad flow to answer questions 2 and 3. After the third question is answered, the model gives 8 situations that may be possible. If the least, and this is a quote, if the least preferred coworker scales, end quote, under the appropriate style for situation is congruent with the leader's style, the leader does nothing as that style complements the situation. So this is a pretty clear-cut model. Lucy and Atria 2016 report that in situation where the style is not congruent, the leader may be ineffective. In Fiedler's theory, leaders were instructed to modify the situation instead of the leader's style. So modifications in situations where the relations are poor could include the leader listening and showing genuine interest in followers. Modifications with situations that involve task structure could involve the leader providing less or more standards that are specific and not providing deadlines that tasks must be completed by. Modifications with situations that involve power now, that element within the leader role could involve the leader not using the power, or with leaders who have little to no power. These leaders may make requests to management for power or become autocratic. And so that ends the discussion on the contingency leadership theory. Now we'll move on to the continuum theory. And this is a spectrum. This theory, the elements existed on a spectrum with one centered on the leader and the other centered on followers as these relate to who will be making the decisions. Okay, so that's key. Lucy and Achua 2016 reported that the behavior of leaders existed on a spectrum with one centered on the leader and the other end centered on the follower. Developed by Tannenbaum and Schmidt, the theory is known as the continuum theory. The theory is concentrated on the persons who would be making the decisions. All right, so it's either the leader or the followers. Okay, and it exists on a spectrum. So Lucy and Atcher reported that a premise of the theory considered that the pattern of leadership that a leader would choose should be constructed from an understanding of the inherent agency of the boss, followers, and the situation. A leader pondering the boss variable will consider the preferred behavioral and personality style when selecting a style of leadership. The behavioral and personality style would be informed by the leader's values, expectations, experience, and trust in the followers. Leaders could thus perceive their own leadership style as one existing on a continuum of participative on one end and autocratic on the other. All right, so those are the two, participative and autocratic. The follower variable of the theory guides followers in considering their own behavior and personality. The exercise informs the follower's preference for leadership style and helps gauge a follower's insight into their readiness and degree of participation. As participation increases, more and more freedom to participate should be encouraged and engaged. The situation and time variables guide leaders and followers in considering environmental variance. These include the size of the organization, technologies used within the organizations, goals, social climate, and structure, and would be used when considering the selection of a leadership style. With a participative leadership style, time used by the leader would be increased as the leader would spend time with followers to conclude on decisions. So spending time with followers, that takes time. To discuss and confer with followers, that takes time. The developers identified 7 cardinal leadership styles that could be chosen by leaders after the leader's consideration of the 3 forces discussed: boss, subordinates, and situation. All right? Okay, so leadership continuum model. The model existed on a continuum of autocratic leadership style on one end and participative leadership style on the other end. There were 7 statements, with the first statement aligned within the autocratic end, a second statement just below, and ending with the 7th statement that was aligned with the participative end. All right, so this model, yes, there were 7 statements, and yes, there were 2 participative and autocratic on either ends, but the degree of participative should be understood, and the degree of the autocratic style should be understood, as well as existing, and the degree of both. All right, and that's what the 7 statements align with. All right, so the first statement, taken from Lucy and Atchua, 2016, page 118. This is all quotes. The first, aligned with the autocratic: state the decision that is not open to discussion. Number 2, make the decision and convince employees that it's a good idea. So now we have entrance of employees, yeah? But it's still on the autocratic end. 3, present the decision and ask if there are any questions, all right? So now we're asking employees. So there's more of an involvement of them. Still autocratic, number 3. Number 4, present a situation that is subject to change based on input. So now we're leaning more towards the participative end, and that's the degree that I was talking about. All of them contain a degree. So number 5, state the situation, ask for a recommended decision, then the leader makes the decision. Number 6, let employees decide within set limits. And number 7, let employees make ongoing decisions. All right, and that's end quote. Asking followers for ideas after presenting how the leader would carry out the decision would likely fall under the midpoint of autocratic and participative leadership styles, since the input could change the decision, but the decision would still be made by the leader. Presenting a problem, asking for ideas to solve the problem, but then making the decision leans more towards the participative end of the model spectrum. Telling a follower that they've been selected for a new assignment and asking if the follower had any questions would align with statement number 3. Thus, the leadership style will align with an autocratic, one that is more autocratic. All right, so now I'll be discussing path goal leadership theory. Lucier and Atchua reported that the path goal leadership theory was first developed by Evans, but was later updated by House in 1971. The theory's model is a sole model amongst the other contingency theory models that does not include a variable for behavior and traits for a leader. The leader is expected to engage one of the 4 leadership styles of the theory to galvanize and strengthen follower performance. The approach is done without consideration of the leader for behavior and traits that are preferred. The theory thus identified several influencing variables within relationships that existed between person and task-oriented leadership. The theory also explored the effects of those influencing variables. The theory's 4 leadership styles are directive, supportive, participative, and achievement-oriented. So the model incorporates those 4 leadership styles. So the path goal leadership model, the theory attempted to define how the satisfaction and actions of followers was influenced by the actions of the leader. Based largely on the process theories of the expectancy and goal setting theories, the model was used to identify a style of leadership that best influenced how followers perceive their goals and the path toward goal attainment. The styles were said to enhance work performance and satisfaction. Thus, the responsibility of motivating followers to obtain the goals of the organization rested solely with the leader. Motivation is enhanced by the leaders explaining the path the followers to take to reap available rewards, while enhancing those rewards that are valued and desired by the follower. Path clarification, end quote, was described as the leaders co-laboring with the follower with the goal of identifying and learning actions that would lead the follower to successfully accomplishing the task and reaping the company's rewards. So that quote is page 119. It was just the path clarification in the text. The model was utilized in determining the objectives of the follower and clarifying how to obtain the goals by utilizing one of the theory's leadership styles. The theory centered on the influencing power of the leader on the goal perception of followers and the path to achieve the goal. The model began with situational variants that would need to be determined. These included follower characteristics of their authoritarianism, wanting to be told what to do, locus of control, and ability. Situational variants also included the environment. The environment considered task structure, degree of job repetitiveness, formal authority, degree of power, the position of leader accorded one, and work group, the degree peers contributed to work satisfaction or follower relationships. So the directive, I'll discuss the directive. The leader provides high structure, followers desiring leadership with authority, possessing external locus of control, and having low ability would be motivated with a directive leadership style. With the supportive, leaders with a supportive style provide considerable consideration. Followers who do not want leadership that is autocratic, possess internal locus of control, and who possess high ability would be motivated with a supportive style. This writer, I think that the place of employment would line up with the participative, and I'll read what that is. Employee input is included in leader decision making. Followers desiring involvement with the team and decision making possess internal locus of control and who possess high ability would be motivated with the participative style. With authority that is weak or strong, environmental tasks that are complex, and high or low peer job satisfaction, followers would be motivated with this style as well. So that gave a description of the characteristics and what type of leader would be best suited to motivate those followers. So it would be participative for this writer's place of employment, and we will discuss that later. Achievement oriented, the 4th leadership style in this path goal leadership theory. Leaders who attempt to make the tasks and responsibilities challenging and who have high expectation of their followers are those who are achievement oriented. These leaders present goals that, though achievable, are made challenging and give their followers rewards. High structure and increased consideration are behaviors that mark the achievement-oriented leadership style. Followers who are amenable to autocratic leadership possess external locus of control and with high ability are motivated by the achievement-oriented style. So, thank you. Now I'll go on to leadership substitutes theory. Elements that could neutralize or substitute leader influence and actions. And so that's the premise here of this theory. Lucy and Atchua 2016 reported that the leadership substitute theory acknowledged elements that could not be controlled by the leader. These elements were acknowledged to have a greater impact on organizational outcomes than the actions of the leader. The elements were said to neutralize the actions leaders could have had on the attitudes and behaviors of followers. The characteristics of followers, the organization, and tasks were examples of elements that either replaced the need for a leader or negated the actions of the leader. The authors reported that leadership substitutes precipitated a redundancy of the leadership style. Thus, followers skilled at a craft would not require a leader's guidance or direction, as these followers would be considered to be self-managed. Neutralizers were said to diminish the potency of a leader's action. Thus, leaders who were not in close proximity with a follower were unable to quickly give task-related directions to followers, and that was an example of the neutralizing aspect. Characteristics of followers. The text reported that the characteristics of followers that could neutralize the actions of a leader involve follower knowledge, training, experience, and ability, professional orientation, and apathy toward the rewards of the organization, and need for independence were other characteristics of followers that could neutralize leader potency. Characteristics of the task. Neutralizing or substitutive elements related to tasks were routine tasks, clarity, methodology that did not change, and experience a sense of accomplishments with completing tasks. Followers who were adept at providing their own feedback related to their accomplishments were also included in those characteristics that neutralized or substituted leadership potency. Characteristics of the organization, procedures and rules that were described as rigid, and staff responsibilities that were extremely specified were among the organizational characteristics that could neutralize leadership potency. Work groups that were close-knit and worked cohesively and were words from the organization that were not leader-controlled were among others. So here we're going to talk about the leadership substitutes theory model. Lucy and Atchua reported that leaders using the leadership substitutes theory would do well by assessing the situation to determine which variables among the three evinced a neutralizing or substituting effect on their leadership. Leaders could then implement actions that are relevant to the situation and that will yield motivation in followers. The goal of the approach is so that leaders would provide support and direction that was not previously provided by the organization, group, or task. To illustrate the approach, the contingency of moral awareness was used to determine leadership effectiveness via the use of leadership substitute theory by both Chuang and Chu, 2016, and Gok et al. These authors found that the actions and potency of a leader were non-existent with followers who possessed an increased awareness of morality. So these people who knew right from wrong and they were very aware of their morality and had high morality, they had no need for a leader to influence that morality or abstaining from actions that would be harmful to the organization. So that was considered a neutralizing effect. However, on the flip side of that, Gok et al. 2017 found that leaders could be instrumental in influencing followers in mitigating deviant actions that could result from low morality awareness. If these followers had not previously been led by leaders who sought to curtail deviant actions, then the text and Gok et al.'s findings support leaders who would step in to provide leadership in situations that had not been previously been provided to mitigate the deviant actions. All right, the model begins with an assessment of followers. The acknowledgement that there is no leader follows on the theory model. The last phase guides leaders in an assessment of the situation with an exploration of the task and organization. The theory guides leaders in modifying the situation instead of changing their leadership style. Organizations could behave in ways that are complementary with the theory by eliminating neutralizers or presenting leadership as irrelevant by emphasizing substitutes such as establishing and supporting teams in self-management, enhancing job enrichment, and introducing automation to handle tasks. The approach provides alternatives to leadership that are comprehensive and account for follower and organizational needs. So that's the 4 contingency leadership theories and their models. I'll now discuss writers, which theory best applies to writers' place of employment, and that would be the path goal leadership theory and model. This writer is employed at a mammoth state agency that employs roughly 15,000 employees across New York State. Many of the responsibilities and tasks are governed by policy. These policies outline the specific actions that must be taken to reach an expected goal. The goals of each department are clearly stated and are used to determine task and responsibility effectiveness. To keep pace with the emergence of new or updated technologies and with the identification of new conditions or pathogens that cause disease, COVID-19